Hello everybody, and welcome back. Today we are here for episode number 3 of the Spittin Facts Season 2. Yes, I understand you are a little confused. There is not 2 screens, we're both together in person, but nonetheless, the excitement is just as real. I'm Ethan Spazarski.
I'm Joey Priano.
And we are here to continue on for what should be the final episode considering the NHL, because it is Stanley Cup Final time. It is it's a sad but exciting time for everybody, Joey, and I really truly believe that, because this Stanley Cup Final is projected to be one of the best, and it's I guess we consider it 2 underdogs considering the spread.
Yeah, the whole playoffs as a whole have been so much fun to watch. One of the more memorable playoffs that I've seen in a while. A lot of big events. The Hurricanes getting swept is a huge event. The best team losing in the first round hasn't happened since Tampa lost to Columbus, and we've never seen a team as good as Boston is. The Colorado Avalanche losing in the first round, former Stanley Cup Finals or winners. And it's just a lot has been going on. We got 2 teams that weren't expected to make it here, and should be a really fun final.
It really should, and I mean, when I say that, Vegas and the Predators and the Panthers were in the bottom 3 of remaining playoff teams at one point when the playoffs started to make it to the Stanley Cup Final percentage wise, and it was something not a lot of people saw. I had Vegas making it all the way to the Stanley Cup Final in my bracket. That's about the only good thing remaining left, to be honest, in my bracket. We'll get into our bracket talks and further predictions down later into the show, but for right now, we want to stick with Stanley Cup Final, and that's with the Panthers and the Knights, who together, all time, it's a 6-3-1 record in favor of the Golden Knights. So past history, we could say Vegas has the upper hand here.
Yeah, Florida has not been historically a very good team. They've been really bad in the early 2000s, and they've kind of kept that through the 2000s. Bringing in Barkov whenever they drafted him really high, I think he was 2nd overall, really kind of revitalized their franchise, but they weren't winning a ton. They were making the playoffs. They were exiting early. They were just one of those teams, but seeing them this far, they're such a fun team. They're really physical. Bobrovsky is playing like the best goalie in the entire world, and if he plays like that, this series isn't going to be close. I think that he'll definitely decline from how well he played against Carolina. I think that Vegas is a little bit better offensively, but if he plays like that, he's going to be known to have the best playoffs from a goalie ever. I think that if he plays like he did against Carolina, he'll win the Conn Smythe, and if not, I think that he'll go to your guy, Matthew Tkachuk, and I guess that's what we'll get into next, is who our Conn Smythe picks are for each team.
Exactly, and you said it, so I'll bring it up. Some Sergei Bobrovsky's playoff stats. As of right now, Sergei Bobrovsky in the playoffs in 14 games is 11-2. He allows just over 2 goals a game, and his save percentage is, if you want to give it the 5 and above, give it a shove, at a 94%, which is exceptional. And our other goaltender, Adin Hill, has very similar stats. Now, unlike Adin Hill, this is not the first time Sergei Bobrovsky's been dealt into the playoffs. His career numbers, they're not as good. His career numbers in 65 games is 28-31. He allows almost 3 goals a game in his career with about a 91% save percentage. So, with that, Joey, to me, this shows, all right, Bobrovsky's getting good at the right time with the right team in this case, but career-wise, do you think that plays a certain role in his expectation or what you think he's able to do?
I think it does. I think even if he doesn't have the career stats that we always look at, he's been to the playoffs before. I didn't even think about it when I said it, but that the President's Trophy winner losing in the first round hasn't happened since Tampa. Well, that was against Sergei Bobrovsky. He's got more experience than Adin Hill, even if the numbers aren't all there. But I think that does play a factor. Adin Hill's really young compared to Bobrovsky. Bobrovsky's been in the league for a lot more years. So I think that definitely does play a factor, but I think that goalie-wise, even though Adin Hill's stats are a little bit better these playoffs, Bobrovsky has 4 more games, and he had a pretty rough first series against Boston statistically. And so the way that he's bounced back against Toronto and Carolina have made those numbers even more impressive.
And back when I was in Waynesburg talking on radio shows, it was the analogy was the East is a bloodbath this year compared to the West. The West, we thought in matchup-wise was going to have it so much easier. And that wasn't completely the case, but previewing it before everything started, that was definitely the case. Adin Hill and Bobrovsky both have evenly been on different amount of teams. I'm pretty sure it's 3 each. between Bobrovsky being drafted by the Flyers, doing a lot of work with the Blue Jackets, and now recently, the past couple of years, in the revamp for Florida has been there as well. But Adin Hill just got to Vegas this year. He wasn't even thought as going to be the starting goaltender because there was Brossoit, there was Jonathan Quick. But Adin Hill gets the nod as Quick is now the backup. And we'll take a look now at Adin Hill's stats. Adin Hill, in 11 games, he started in 9 of them. 7-3. He allows just a hair over 2 goals a game. And again, 0.02% better than Bobrovsky. And like I mentioned before, when I was making this, it made me laugh. His career playoff stats will look just at where we read them to you, because those are his career playoff stats. He hasn't had an opportunity. So I'll ask you kind of the same question. Do you think his inexperience makes him better as of right now because this is all he has to learn from? Or do you think Bobrovsky still has the edge with the experience?
Well, I think that the first thought is I would say, yes, he does suffer from the lack of experience. Nobody expected him to be the starter. If they got to the finals, they brought in Jonathan Quick because he's been to the playoffs so many times. He's won cups. He played really well last year when nobody thought the Kings had a chance, made it past the first round. And that was one of the reasons they brought him in, was a veteran guy. And the fact that he hasn't played since the first round of the playoffs, like he hasn't been there, is really a nod to how well Adin Hill has been playing. And so as much as I want to say, oh, well, Bobrovsky has so much more experience and Adin Hill is so young and we don't really know what he can do, he's proved us wrong in this series. He beat the Dallas Stars, who beat the Kraken, who beat the reigning Stanley Cup champion Avalanche. So I think that it plays a little bit of a factor, but not as much as people are saying, because he has proven himself these playoffs, averaging barely 2 goals a game, which is really tough to do, especially for a whole playoffs.
Exactly, I completely agree with you. I think it's very interesting because Sergei Bobrovsky, while he does have more experience in games played, and the career numbers aren't as good as Adin Hill's for that matter, I do think both goaltenders have played an exceptional playoffs. And as of right now, you need to stick in the now, what's been going on this year, and don't let the last few years affect you. I think both goaltenders pretty much are evenly matched as of if we're looking at a this year standpoint. So I think Bobrovsky just as much of an edge as Hill, and I don't think any one of these goaltenders, it'd be fair to say one's playing strictly better than another because of how close it's been. And if we want to talk about lack of experience, well, another potential Conn Smythe winner of this playoffs, the team points leader of the Vegas Golden Knights, Jack Eichel, definitely has a fair share in that, because it was funny, I looked through the storyline of Jack Eichel recently. Drafted by the Sabres, makes the captain, fails his physical, gets hurt, loses the captain, gets traded. It's a whole story, but he's really turned it around from last year to this year. And we'll quickly look at the stats as Joey gives off his opinion on it with 16 games played, 18 points, and those are his career numbers playoff-wise, because he didn't make it to playoffs with the Sabres.
Yeah, that is also who I picked for my Conn Smythe winner. You can give it to Marchessault. He's had a really, really good playoffs, but I do think Eichel gets the nod for Conn Smythe. He's been really good, and in that story, he does all those things. Gets hurt, loses the captain, ended up wanting to get traded, really requested out of Buffalo, didn't want to be there, wanted to go to a team that won. Buffalo really didn't want to get rid of him. They drafted him really high. They really wanted him to be their guy. And he gets traded away, and we can see what he does when he's got talent around him. The Sabres, historically, recently, have really good stretches of time and then can't finish. They started off 2 years ago really, really well, were in first place halfway through the year, and then fell apart. This year, they were right around that wild card spot all year and just couldn't get above the Panthers and the Pens. And so it really shows you what he can do with the talent around him, and I do think that he would be your Conn Smythe. I think that either goalie this year could get Conn Smythe based on the way these finals go. If one of these goalies just completely destroys the other team and lets in no goals, or lets in like 1.5 goals or less per game, I think they can win it because of how well they've played going up to this point. But I think that if you look at it right now, you got to give it to Jack Eichel because he's led that team. He's got more experience than a lot of guys there on a very young Vegas Golden Knights team. So I think that he does get the Conn Smythe if they were to get there right now.
Exactly, and now that we've mentioned it a bunch of times, it's definitely, here are the official Conn Smythe winners, according to us, for our predictions. So Joey mentioned before, Sergei Bobrovsky and Jack Eichel. I completely agree with you. I would put I would put Bobrovsky in the top 2 for that conversation, no question, because the only reason I don't have him actually is because it's just not stereotypical or ethical for a goaltender to win it. Would I love for that to change up? 100%. I'm never against that. I do think both goaltenders are fair candidates for this year because of the stellar performance. I think both goaltenders were on the same trajectory. Think about it. They weren't the starters to start out. It was Lyon and then it was Boursois. Both started, and then 3 or 4 games into the first-round series, these goaltenders get put in. They've done exceptional work. And both teams were kind of struggling, in a sense, with the starters they originally had in place. So, hey, fair share to both. But for me, just because of just how Conn Smythe's been handed out, I'm going to give mine for my Conn Smythe. If Florida wins, to Matthew Tkachuk and his stats, which we'll show you here next. But Matthew Tkachuk, if Florida wins, if Vegas wins, it definitely should go to Jack Eichel. We can both very much agree on that. And now we're going to shift over, wanting to show you guys just real quick, the Matthew Tkachuk stats so far in the playoffs. In the 2023 playoffs, Tkachuk, 9 goals, 12 points. 9 goals, 12 assists. 21 total points. That's second in the playoffs. You know who has the first most right now?
Is it Draisaitl?
No, it is actually Roope Hintz with 24.
Draisaitl
still leads in goals.
He does lead in goals.
And Hintz both still lead in their respective goals and points category. Both have now been eliminated from the playoffs, and they both are still up there. So that goes to show the playoffs. You can have a singular stellar performance, but it's a team effort down to the very, very end. And that's something we hated to see because you had the Oilers going far. I had the Stars going far, and I should have stuck to my original guts because on my official bracket I do have Vegas, which we'll show you. But on the guessing our picks, I did choose Dallas to beat Vegas after you lightly convinced me.
Yeah, I know.
I'm
0 for 2.
Mistakes were made. I'm 1-1. No one is perfect, nonetheless. So now mentioning the bracket, I think it's very fair that we just look at that bracket real quick. Here's the official bracket of the playoffs so far of what's happened. Joey made mention to it before. If you want to run through it again, just to quickly summarize what's all happened.
Yeah, so you want me to go game by game?
Yeah, just say series by series the winners.
Yeah, so Florida upset Boston in probably the craziest series that we've seen in a long time. The Toronto Maple Leafs finally get past the first round and make it to the second round and then completely collapse as a team, forgetting how to play in the playoffs. The Carolina Hurricanes beat the Islanders in a pretty uneventful first round, but showed that the Hurricanes were strong. The Devils come crawling back against the Rangers to win it in 7. Come back from down 3-1, I think, and come back. And then the Panthers continue to steamroll, and they, as I said, destroy the Maple Leafs, and the Hurricanes do the same to the Devils, destroying them in 5. And then the Florida Panthers beat the Hurricanes in a sweep in one of the best goaltender performances I've ever seen in a series by Bobrovsky. In the West, you have the first-time Seattle Kraken beating the former Stanley Cup champions Colorado Avalanche in 7, right? In 7 games for one of the... Such a great win for that franchise to go in and beat the top team in the West. The Stars beating the Minnesota Wild in a pretty easy series after losing in overtime the first game in double overtime to go on and beat the Wild. Vegas beat the Jets in a pretty uneventful series. The Oilers beat the Kings in a pretty uneventful series. McDavid and Draisaitl just doing their thing. The Stars going to beat the Kraken in maybe my series of the playoffs so far. That was the most fun for me to watch. Vegas goes in and kicks out McDavid and Draisaitl for another time that they can't get past the second round, showing you that they need depth. The Vegas Golden Knights going and beating the Stars to make it to the Stanley Cup Finals in a really hard-fought battle. And now here we are in the finals, the Panthers and the Golden Knights.
It has been a heck of a battle. And if we're talking favorite series, I think if I had to pick a favorite series, I'd probably go Florida and Boston. Not original. It's just basic, but it's true. The complete turnaround. We mentioned Florida and Ottawa are the only teams to beat Boston twice in the regular season. They scored 17 goals on them in those 2 games. Only team that we all thought had a chance. And I said, look, I'll be real with you. I really don't see Florida's odds to win, period. They're in the Stanley Cup Final. So clearly I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. But, yeah.
Yeah, when we I think the first episode when we talked about going into the playoffs a little bit ago, I said, I think that Boston's going to win in 5 because, Florida will probably squeak one out somewhere.
Yeah.
They'll probably get one somewhere, and here they are now. And it shows how much I wish I would have watched Florida more in the regular season, because watching all 4 games of that Carolina series, they're playing like a number 1 seed.
Exactly.
And there are so many really great series. Both Seattle Kraken series were just so entertaining, knowing that they're a super new team to the league, got a really young team with a couple veterans, seeing them go in and win 2 series in 7, or 1 series, excuse me, and then seeing the best team ever lose in the first round. But then and then we've also got series like Winnipeg. They didn't do anything.
Very uneventful. I had one sweep in my entire bracket, and I said it was going to be Vegas versus Winnipeg. Vegas would sweep Winnipeg, and somehow that wasn't a sweep. But Carolina losing to Florida in 4 games which I could never bet on. I'm glad I don't.
I wonder what the payout for that was if you bet Florida in 4.
You would have had a lot of money.
Line
a lot of money. No, that would have been very good and interesting for anyone who invests in that. But again, I think it's crucial to remember. We talked about series with Vegas and Dallas. 3 of the 6 games that were played ended in overtime, and luckily all of them went to just 1 overtime. No one played, unlike Florida. No team played 2 games in one night at once, starting at 8 and ending at 1, past 1, almost 2 in the morning. Actually, I think the Dallas Star game. There's Dallas Star series. Unfortunately, only really got interesting when Dallas found themselves too far behind, down 3-0, and that's what makes it hard. Whether it's an NBA, whether it's an NHL series. A reverse sweep is so much harder than a regular sweep because you find yourself down 3 games. All you need to do is lose 1 game and it's over. So you got to think, well, if we're going to do this, you got to be prepared, because if playing backfires, then you don't have that comfort zone or a cushion rather than the other team does for a sweep. Whether you are the Miami Heat or whether you are the the Vegas Golden Knights. Luckily, both teams did pull out. There was no upset in that fashion of it versus those 2 teams. But I do want to get to this right here. Now, Puck Report NHL. We are good. We are good friends with them. These stats do come via Puck Report NHL, so credit to them. The graphic this time was made by me. I used their graphic before. Again, all credit to them for that. But the stats I did get from theirs as well. They help make this a little easier. So, head to head this year. Well, we mentioned Vegas leads the all-time series. This year, it's split 2 games. Each team won 1. Vegas had much more points, considering Florida was a second wildcard team and Vegas was a number 2 seed. Correct? Yes. Yep. But if we go down stat wise, it cuts pretty evenly on both directions. While Florida does score more goals a game, Vegas allows less goals a game, and both special teams on these teams. I think if there's one knock you got to go on Florida and Vegas is their special teams are not really that good.
No, not at all.
No, they're not good at all. Both teams are in the middle of the bottom in the power play category, and they are definitely at the bottom in the penalty kill category. So, Joey, if you want to go on and just kind of explain to everybody what some of these stats really mean and what they show.
Yeah, the biggest stat that I want to know, and we don't have it here, but I want to see these numbers compared minus the Boston series, because Florida, I think, would have a way better goals against per game after Boston, but the fact that they had 7 games in Boston with overtimes compared to Winnipeg for Vegas really is a completely different matchup, and that's what happens when you've got the 2 seed and the 8 seed, obviously. I'm not saying it's not fair, but it's really, they've played so strong through these last 2 series. I don't know if I watched a game of the Montreal series the Toronto series, because it was so boring. They went in and they destroyed them every night except for 1 where they lost in overtime.
I watched
it wasn't close at all.
I watched half of game 1 and half of game 3, and that was pretty much it. There was no interest to it. But if you want to get just an understanding of the record wise, Florida has 4 losses in the entire playoffs. 3 of them came against Boston.
Yeah.
So they only lost 1 game
in overtime.
Since that span. So you got to look at it as Florida has, since the Boston series, since beating the tallest and heaviest giant, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. They beat the hardest team probably they're going to face up until now. And honestly, I believe Boston's the hardest team Florida's had to face up to this point. We'll pull up the stats just real quickly one more time for the Florida-Vegas comparison. I truly do believe that, though. I think Boston was their hardest team. I think Vegas isn't as good as Boston was, at least. But you do got to credit that Vegas is a better team technically because they're here and Boston isn't.
Mm-hmm. I've got kind of a hot take. Okay. Not really, but just a little bit. I think that I'm not going to say they would have won it. I'm not going to go that far because of the way they've played. But I think that if Carolina would have edged out that 4 overtime game and beaten Florida, I think it goes 7. I think that was so much momentum to Florida, coming off of destroying the Maple Leafs, and then the Hurricanes coming off destroying the Devils. Both had so much momentum, and it showed how much each team wanted it so badly going into playing each other. And they had a lot of time due to the fact that the Western Series took so long. I think that there was so much momentum in that game, and the fact that they played 2 full games to lose is just so heartbreaking. I think that if Carolina would have gotten the win in that, I think it at least goes 7. I'm not saying they would have won it, but I think that it goes a lot more games. And so I think that helped the Panthers because I think that it was so demoralizing that they didn't need that hard-fought series. They haven't played in like a week, and Vegas is coming off of a hard-fought 6-game series. So I think it's going to show they had a lot of rest, but did they have too much rest? Has it been too long since they've played compared to how long it's been since Vegas played?
No, I think that's a fair worry because, Florida kind of steamrolled right through everyone they had, and another team that steamrolled through everyone had, the Denver Nuggets. They steamrolled. Mm-hmm. We've talked about it a couple times. And then while on the other side, both teams, whether it is the Vegas Golden Knights or whether it's Miami Heat, they have played more recently. They have been more, aware of everything. So that's definitely going to play a factor into it. But each series we have our own different opinions on it. But, just to give real quick some overall understanding of other players before we go into our final predictions mm-hmm. for the series. Jack Eichel, again, we mentioned before, leads in points. However, you mentioned the guy before, Jonathan Marchessault actually leads in goals. Mm-hmm. So he's not in the top 4 in stat-wise. However, he does lead the team with 10 goals. So, Eichel, 18 points. Jonathan Marchessault has 17 points with Mark Stone. And then Ivan Barbashev,
Big surprise.
A kid we had shifted over from St. Louis Blues mm-hmm. middle of the season just after the Penguins played him. I think everyone had... Brian Boucher said it best. This kid is a young physical talent who we know that St. Louis was interested in giving away, and they did. And he has had such an impact. Him and Mark Stone tied for third with 15 points each for this team. And then, of course, we mentioned Aiden Hill, some of his stats before. And then for the Florida Panthers, Matthew Tkachuk, 21 points. We have Carter Verhaeghe. I'll admit, that was a name I didn't expect to read off as the number 2 point mm-hmm. leader with 15 points. And then Alexander Barkov, the fearless captain.
Always there.
He's always around. He has 14 points. And then Sam Reinhart with 11. So, clearly, Vegas has scored more points, but they also have played one more game than the Florida Panthers have overall in this playoff. So
and that's where I think that Vegas has an edge. Like, we talked about edges, who has the edge over who. It's very close. And how I think that Bobrovsky has an edge over Hill. I think that the edge that Vegas has that they need to rely on is they've got so much depth in their second and third lines. They've got 3 guys with at least 15 points. Or 4 guys, with at least 15 points. And their third and fourth lines really play well. And I think that's where they're going to need to be strongest to beat the Panthers, because the Panthers' top lines are so scary. Barkov, Verhaeghe, and Tkachuk always there. But it's going to be digging deep in those bottom lines where they can overtake it and being stronger defensively, because Florida is such a strong team defensively. They destroyed the Hurricanes, and not just scoring more goals. All of the games were close, but they beat them up. They hit them so hard all the time, played in deep. And I think that if Vegas can match that and they can not get rattled so easily like the young Hurricanes did, I think that's where they can win this series.
I agree with you. And Minnesota kind of did the same thing with Dallas, and commentary talked about it. Again, that was Brian and everybody. They talked about it. It was, you could think of it skill versus physicality, and skill has won one of those times, but physicality for the Florida Panthers has won another. So, depending how you utilize it. And I think just that really ties down to the coaching for Florida as well, as bringing everyone together, saying, hey, guys, come here, look, the season Florida's had. They have had the pinnacle of an up and down year.
They barely made it. They were
had
1 point in over the Pens.
They had a definition of an up and down insane year where there were times where this team was like, no, there's no way. Between the Islanders, the Penguins, the Panthers, and the Sabres, it was a dead giveaway that everyone thought it was Islanders, Penguins. Mm-hmm. And then the Penguins, being the master botchers that they have been this year, they showed why they weren't fit to be in here. Florida said, we are. And then they beat Boston, and they steamrolled the Maple Leafs and the Canes. To me, Florida is without a doubt the most deserving team up at this point to be here. So it has been awesome to see. And I do want both of us. We're going to look real quick, just more of a just a laughing factor of our brackets. Now, before we talk about the finals, our final predictions, we'll even look at our brackets. So both of these brackets, prepare to laugh. This is going to be pretty funny. So here's Joey's. Joey, go ahead. I'll even let you take it away. I won't say anything.
Well, I'll start off with the good. I had Carolina winning I had the Carolina section completely perfect, down to the game. I had Carolina in 6. I had the Devils in 7, and then I had Carolina in 5. I had all that perfect. And that's about it. I had Vegas correct, and I had Vegas correct winning the first round, and I had Edmonton correct winning the first round, and that's the only first round matchups I had. Like many of you, I'm sure, I had Boston and Edmonton. I know that most of you had Boston. And just to nod what you said a little bit ago, I think if the Pens don't choke and they make the playoffs, I think Boston's in the finals right now.
Oh, 100%.
I think it's like, man, they lost to the 8 seed and they lost, but you're right. They're the best team in the playoffs other than the Panthers, as we've seen. I had Tampa over Toronto just because that one was a kind of a meme pick. It's been so long since they've got past the first round. Why not one more year?
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
But I was wrong on that. My biggest mistake in the whole thing, I think everybody's biggest mistake was Florida. Nobody had them. But my biggest thing was I was a believer in Minnesota, and they did not show up. I had them over Dallas and over Colorado, who didn't make it either. I was a big believer in Kirill Kaprizov. I really thought he was the guy, and Matt Dumba. But that didn't turn out so great. But no, yeah, you're right. It's fun to laugh about it and fun to see, I was so confident about this year. Every year I go into it thinking, well, I didn't really know what I was talking about last year, but I watched a lot of hockey and I know what I'm talking about this year. And then you see see what you had after, and it's like, cool, man.
If it makes you feel better, mine's not any better at all. And
your West is...
My West was perfect. Now the games were not. The games were not, but the picks were right, and that's obviously more or less the whole point. But no, if we look at the picks, I picked Seattle over Colorado in 6. I picked Dallas over Minnesota in 6. That's the only one where I got the games right. Mm-hmm. Again, I had Vegas over Winnipeg in a sweep. Then I had Edmonton over LA in 5. In both years, LA has given me a run for my money. My run for my metaphorical money. Because I always throw them under the bus so quickly, and then they just come out and dominate.
It's because they're not flashy.
No,
that's
they're
why.
not.
They don't have the flashy guys.
They have 2 X Factor guys in Doughty and Kopitar, and that's it.
Yeah, and they've been there since 2014.
No, Kevin Fiala, give him a lot of credit too from injury to where he is. I did have Dallas over Seattle. I had Vegas over Edmonton because I knew Edmonton doesn't have any good depth, and their goaltending to me is just so atrocious. I thought Vegas would own them fairly well in 6 games. I had Dallas over Seattle in 6. The series did go to 7. Seattle gave Dallas more of a run for their money than I expected. And that all starts with Philip Grubauer, who, besides Bobrovsky and Hill, has been the best goaltender in the playoffs, without a doubt, for their respective team. Then we look to the East, and I only had one pick right.
Yeah.
It was in the first. I had Devils over Rangers in 7. And that was a last-minute switch when I filled out the bracket. Everything else is atrociously wrong. Boston over Florida in 5. Couldn't be more wrong. Could have been, actually, that's not true. It could have been right if Boston would have won. Tampa over Toronto in 7. It was Toronto in 6. Islanders over Carolina in 7. I thought there was going to be another Carolina choke because, from what I've seen, Islanders playoff-wise, that's
because they beat the Pens every year.
It is a 4-0 sweep of that series. It wasn't even close. And then, like I said, Devils, Rangers, right? And then I had the Devils make it to the conference finals, but they did not beat the Islanders because they didn't play the Islanders. They played the Hurricanes, and the Hurricanes massacred the Devils in a very fair series. Boston and Tampa never happened because that
Neither
Boston
one of
team.
them won. Yeah.
No,
yeah.
no, because
I had the
no team
same.
didn't win. It was Florida versus Toronto. Florida, as we know, dominates Toronto in 5 games. Switching it over, then the Eastern Conference Final again. No teams are right, so therefore it's just wrong. So I got 50% of the conference. So I got 50% of the Stanley Cup Final correct, and I had Vegas losing there in 7 games over Boston. So that is my bracket. So both have they're shining. Hey, like, all right, cool. I see you. Like how far the Canes made with the Canes being perfect and my perfect side of the West, but it also has the funny parts where it's, oh my god, we have Boston in 5 and Boston in 6. So
yeah, you should be rooting for Florida.
Yeah,
then you'll get your whole West right. If
should.
Vegas loses in the final, you'll be perfect in the West.
I technically should. There's no question. But now is the time for just a selection of who we think is going to win. And believe it or not, we did not talk about this at all. Who we thought was going to win.
We don't. I have no idea what you're.
I had no idea who he was going to pick. I kind of did on purpose. However, I'm a silly goose and I didn't even make a graphic for it, so it kind of works out.
Yeah.
But we'll throw up this one just because it's there, just to give everyone an idea. Joey, do you want to go first?
I guess so, but this is a toss-up. Every day I'm thinking the other team's going to win. Vegas has the depth. I think Florida's got the goalie, and I think that it's going to be a hard fight. I do think it goes 7. I hope and I think it goes 7 because
I pray to God it goes
these
7.
are my favorite kinds of playoffs where, as much as I want my teams to be in it, as much as I wanted the Hurricanes or the Pens to be there, of course, I love both of these teams. Both of these teams have been so fun to watch. I've got nothing against Florida for beating the Hurricanes. No resentment. I love both of these teams.
I'm sure they're glad they forgive you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that both of these teams are going to be around for a while. I think Tkachuk's insane. I think Bobrovsky's insane. I think Eichel's insane. I'm going to take Florida in 7.
I'm so glad you took
And
Florida.
you know what I'm going to say? Go
ahead, say it.
Tkachuk overtime winner.
Tkachuk overtime winner in 7. That's not. He has 2 overtime winners so far this series.
And I've been wrong about everything this playoff. So Vegas is probably going to win because I said that. But
well,
I'll take.
You know what's funny? I've gone up against Florida the entire playoffs. There's no question about it. We talked about before in the last NHL episode we had. I didn't take Florida in the first round. I didn't take him in the second round. I took them in the conference final.
I did not.
And you did not, and they ended up winning. And you know what I said to you? I said, Joey, I'm never going against Florida again. Well, I lied. I'm going Vegas.
You're taking Vegas?
I am going to take Vegas, and you know why, is, as the pre-mentioned, special teams. Vegas is a very disciplined team. They don't give you a lot of power play opportunities, while for Florida it's the opposite. You mentioned before, Florida's a very physical team. They'll go at your head, but a lot of times that has come back to get them. Hashtag Wes McCauley. There for being the ref for that Toronto-Florida series, they felt there was a lot of unnecessary penalties called, but nonetheless they were there. And according to the stats, to me, that is why Vegas is going to win. Because I don't think it's fair to say one goaltender is better than the other this year. I think both teams are evenly matched depth-wise. I think Vegas does have more. While they do, their points are technically better. Florida did get here in one less game, and Florida has proven themselves as a turnaround team. But to me, this is Vegas' series to lose. I say they win in 7 games. Ooh. Bruce Cassidy gets that Stanley Cup that's evaded him his entire career. He's able to make up for the loss with Boston against St. Louis in 7 back in 2019. I'm going to take the Vegas Golden Knights. Keep it interesting.
And that's not a wrong pick.
No, I think both picks are very fair.
This is one of the first playoffs in a while I've been like, I have no idea.
No,
Both of these teams are so good at what they do. They're special to what they do. And it's going to be so fun. I think it'll be fun that if it goes to Game 7, it'll be back in Vegas. Vegas is pre-shows and everything. They're crazy. If Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals is in Vegas, that could be one of the most viewed games ever.
Well, and it's funny. So the Miami Heat and Florida Panthers will be competing on games back-to-back nights for Game 3 and 4. And if everything lines up and everything goes past that point as well. So South Florida, obviously, good luck to everyone here, especially from us. It's very exciting. Now, just of course, as listed over here to our left, the games. Game 1 will start Saturday. What better time? Saturday in Las Vegas, Nevada. 8 o'clock puck drop. All games are going to be on TNT, especially 5 through 7, if necessary. Fingers crossed it is necessary. Again, all games on TNT. Game 1 Saturday at 8. Game 2 will be on Monday at 8. and then Game 3 Thursday at 8. So just count every other day at 8 p.m. on TNT. Literally down the list. Every other day, starting Saturday at 8 p.m. Be ready for some hockey, very exciting hockey. And basketball sneak peek should be our next episode, which we'll be planning accordingly. But that is going to do it all here for this episode of Spittin' Facts, Season 2, Episode 3. Our final hockey talk for now.
We'll give a recap after.
Oh, definitely. Of the Stanley Cup Finals, it is going to be our final episode. And it makes me sad, but hockey comes around so fast. Yeah, I don't even mind, because the teams that make the finals have to like 2.5 months to rest, and then they're back at it. That's why Tampa's been struggling so much, because
and in that 2.5 months, it's football season.
It's football season. It's baseball's getting a little more interesting.
Yeah.
So a lot more content to be coming out. We appreciate as always everyone who listens in. The liking, the subscribing, do it. I want to hear more comments. I need to see some comments. What everyone has to say. I'd love to hear takes, critiques, etc. All of it. That's all I have. Joey, how about you?
No, that's all I got. Can't wait for the next one.
Exactly.
Yep.
No, social medias will be listed up, coming up right after this. So, with that being said, we appreciate everybody. I'm Ethan Spazarski.
I'm Joey Priano.
This is Joey Priano, and guys, we're going to see you next time. Have a great one.